The toll road business should not be working right now. Americans hate tolls. The federal gas tax hasn't gone up since 1993. Every state DOT complains about being broke. But here's the weird part. Private investment funds have spent well over $30 billion buying up American toll roads and concessions since the mid-2000s. Australian pension funds want a piece. Canadian pension funds want a piece. Wall Street infrastructure funds that used to chase office towers are now chasing 8-lane stretches of asphalt in Indiana. So if you've ever wondered why a sophisticated investor would fight to own something every driver in America resents, the first thing you need to understand is that the product is not the road. When an investor buys a toll concession, they're not buying pavement. They're buying a government-granted legal monopoly, a multi-decade right to be the only way through a choke point that people have no real alternative to. Some of these run 35 years. Some run 75. The Chicago Skyway deal runs 99. The pavement is almost incidental. What's actually changing hands is the exclusive right to charge for something people are structurally forced to use. And once you see it that way, sophisticated buyers stop valuing these things like real estate and start valuing them like long-duration bonds. In 2005, Cintra of Spain and Macquarie of Australia paid the city of Chicago $1.83 billion for a 99-year lease on the Skyway, a 7.8-mile elevated toll road. That works out to about $234 million a mile. On paper that looked insane. But they weren't buying 7.8 miles of asphalt. They were buying nearly a century of a predictable inflation-linked cash flow, discounted back to today's dollars the same way you'd price a bond that pays out for 99 years straight. The math only makes sense if you stop thinking about what the asset is and start thinking about what it pays. And the cost side of this business is almost embarrassingly good. The road itself was usually built decades ago with taxpayer money, so the concessionaire didn't pay construction costs. The marginal cost of one more car crossing is close to zero. Geography does the selling, because if you live in Fort Lee, New Jersey and work in Manhattan, you are not taking a scenic detour to avoid a toll. And most contracts bake in toll increases tied to inflation or GDP growth automatically, so the price goes up whether or not the operator lifts a finger. Here's a fun legal quirk. In 1990, California let a private company build the 91 express lanes down the median of a riverside freeway, and Caltrans agreed to a non-compete clause banning any improvements within a mile and a half of the road on either side for the life of the deal. That meant the state of California could not legally widen its own freeway, because doing so might siphon a few paying customers away from the private toll lanes next to it. Congestion got so bad that in 2003, Orange County's Transportation Authority had to pay $207.5 million just to buy the company out and get the right to fix its own road back. So at this point you can probably guess how the resale numbers look. That same Chicago Skyway sold again in 2015, this time to a trio of Canadian pension funds, for $2.8 billion. With 89 years left on the clock instead of 99. That's 53% more money for 10 fewer years. And it's not even the wildest example. In 2006, Cintra and Macquarie paid Indiana $3.8 billion for a 75-year lease on its 157-mile toll road. By 2014, the concession company had piled up nearly $6 billion in debt and filed for bankruptcy. And yet in 2015, with 66 years left, a totally different buyer, IFM Investors, paid $5.7 billion for what remained. A bankrupt asset still sold for 50% more than the original 75-year price. That's how confident buyers are in the cash flow underneath. But here's the thing. Collecting the toll is not actually the most interesting part of this business anymore. The real money is in what operators do with the timing of the cash. Toll roads like the 91 express lanes pioneered congestion pricing, where the price adjusts in real time based on demand, sometimes changing every few minutes with no ceiling. That lets an operator squeeze dramatically more revenue out of the exact same stretch of pavement without laying a single new foot of road. And on the financing side, concessionaires routinely borrow huge sums against decades of projected future tolls, essentially pulling tomorrow's cash flow into today, then betting on interest rates and refinancing terms in between. When that bet goes well, the spread is the real profit. When it goes badly, that's exactly what buried the Indiana toll road in debt. And because there's so much money and so much monopoly power sitting inside these agencies, they attract exactly the kind of people you'd expect. The George Washington Bridge, run by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, carries more than 100 million vehicles a year, making it the busiest motor vehicle bridge on Earth. In 2013, a Port Authority official named William Baroni helped orchestrate the shutdown of toll lanes leading onto that bridge for 4 days, snarling an entire town's traffic, as political punishment against a mayor who wouldn't endorse the governor's re-election. Baroni was convicted and sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. The case became national news as Bridgegate. It wasn't about stealing toll money. It was proof of how much leverage sits inside control of a single choke point that 100 million cars a year have no way around. So, the scale here gets absurd fast. Transurban, the Australian company that's become the closest thing to a global toll road major, pulled in roughly $3.5 billion in toll revenue in its most recent full year, running an EBITDA margin above 73%. For comparison, Costco runs on a gross margin around 13%. Walmart runs around 24%. Even Apple, the gold standard for corporate margins, tops out somewhere in the mid-40s. A toll road, dollar for dollar, outmargins the most profitable consumer brands on the planet, and it does it selling something nobody wants to buy. The industry does have a real threat, though. Traffic on many U.S. toll facilities is still running below 2019 levels because of remote work, and states have started pushing back hard on the kind of deals that created problems like the State Route 91 non-compete clause, with several banning them outright. That squeezes the old playbook of just leasing out a fixed asset and locking in guaranteed exclusivity. So the big operators are leaning harder into dynamic pricing on existing lanes and buying up new managed lane projects rather than fighting for old-style monopoly protections. Which is why, even with traffic still soft in places and political heat rising on these deals, the acquisitions keep happening. Another pension fund buys into another concession. Another state signs another 50-year lease to plug a budget hole. Another quarter of record margins that nobody outside the finance world pays attention to, on an asset everybody complains about every single day, which is exactly why it works.